There's a city in Europe so visually striking, so rich in artistic legacy, it almost feels unreal. I finally visited it, and what happened next turned into one of the most moving painting experiences I've had all year. A place I've dreamed of seeing for years. I travelled there with a mission to explore the streets, soak in the atmosphere and paint it, right there on location. In this video, I'll take you through my artist's journey, from sketching masterworks inside a world-renowned museum, to capturing golden light at sunset with my plein air kit, and finally discovering a quiet corner of the city where I painted among the trees. Along the way, I'll share my process, my thoughts, and some unexpected moments of connection, both with the city and its art. Alphonse Mucha is one of my favourite artists, a visionary whose work has deeply influenced my own. So naturally, my first stop in the city was the Mucha Museum, where I could finally see his masterworks up close. It was surreal, walking through a gallery of pieces I'd only ever seen online or in books. I've actually done a detailed master study of one of his illustrations before. You can watch that video here if you're curious. But in this visit, I brought my sketchbook with me and spent time standing in front of his works, sketching two of them right there in the exhibition. What struck me the most was the scale and detail of his iconic poster illustrations. Elegant, flowing, with that signature Art Nouveau rhythm. But I was also hoping to see some of his Slav epic paintings, powerful, large-scale works that reveal his range and mastery in realism and storytelling. Although there were fewer of those on display, one piece stood out to me, a painting titled Czech Heart. A tender scene that appeared to show a mother and son. It had a softness to it that felt deeply personal. The museum included his famous Four Seasons series, along with advertisement posters, one for Absinthe, one for Nestle, and even one featuring Queen Victoria. I found myself lingering near a glass case filled with Mucha's smaller works, exquisite drawings, delicate paintings, and detailed design layouts with handwritten notes. As I stood sketching, I noticed another visitor doing the same, quietly observing and drawing with a pencil. It was a lovely, unspoken moment. Two artists, sketchbooks in hand, sharing a kind of silent reverence. One thing that struck me in the museum was just how much presence his work holds, even in the quieter corners of the exhibition, where there's no gold leaf or ornate frames. The sheer confidence in his line, the elegance of his compositions, it's magnetic. You get this overwhelming sense that Mucha wasn't trying to impress anyone. He simply knew who he was as an artist. That kind of artistic conviction is something I think we all chase, and seeing it displayed so unapologetically, even in his commercial work, made me stop and reassess how I approach my own. The museum itself is small, compact, but there's this sacred feeling inside, like you're not just looking at pretty pictures, you're stepping into someone's creative legacy. I found myself slowing down without meaning to. You start noticing the way he handles space, how he balances detail with flow, the energy of the figures, the symbolism woven through everything. It reminded me that being a painter isn't just about technical ability, it's about sensitivity and awareness. After I left the museum, it was time to head out into the city. I'd seen photos of this place before. The architecture, the colours, but being there in person, walking those streets, it was on another level. The city has this romantic, timeless quality, grand and gothic in places, soft and serene in others. As golden hour approached, I began searching for a place to paint. I made my way to one of the higher outlooks above the city. The first platform I reached had lovely views, but I noticed another one just ahead, slightly higher, with some people gathered. So I went there. The light was perfect, the kind of warm, fading light that makes you want to stop and breathe it all in. I set up quickly, tripod, easel, my plein air kit, knowing how fast sunset moves at this time of year. I began sketching my composition in red pencil, already feeling the light shift behind me. At that point, I asked a couple nearby if they could take a quick video or two of me painting, just to capture the moment before it disappeared. I managed only a few brushstrokes before the golden light slipped behind the hills, but what stood out to me was the river below, and the 3 or 4 bridges crossing it. The water reflected the light in this magical way, soft ripples of gold and grey. And that's what I focused on. As the sun dipped further, the temperature dropped too. I realised this would have to be a painting I finished back home in the studio. I packed everything down and made my way back into the city as twilight set in. Prague at night is stunning. Lights flicker along the water's edge and everything feels like it's wrapped in a kind of soft enchantment. It's the kind of city you could get lost in the best way, and I imagine it's an incredible place for couples to explore together. I woke up early the next day, ready to see more of what the city had to offer. The streets were filled with ornate details, sculptures tucked into corners, soaring church towers that looked like something out of a film set. I wandered into one of the city's churches, hushed and echoing, and continued toward the river, crossing one of the same bridges I had painted the night before. That's when I found it, a small park connected to the main street, almost like a quiet island stretching out into the water. It was calm, removed from the tourist flow, and framed by the golden tones of autumn. That's where I saw the statue, positioned just right between the trees with the soft sky behind it. I knew instantly this would be my second plein air painting of the trip. This is a park in Prague that's right near one of the bridges. Really beautiful spot. Not many tourists, could be a good spot to paint, so I'm just going to have a look a little bit closer to the water and see if it's going to be worth it or not. It looks good so far. We've got the autumn trees in here too, so let's have a look. I set up my easel again. This time it was quieter, just me, the trees, and the wind rustling through the leaves. I got into flow, mixing colours, making slow, intentional brush marks, working small but focused. At one point I realised I didn't even know who the statue was of, but I let that thought pass, letting the scene guide me instead of facts. My kit was fairly light, watercolour and gouache, portable enough to carry all across the city in my backpack. This is going to have to be a really quick sketch today because I'm running out of time, so I'm just mixing some colour for the sky, which is titanium white and ultramarine blue. One thing I love about painting on location is how it forces you to slow down and really see where you are, noticing and sensing things all around you. With Prague, that's especially rewarding. The longer you look, the more you notice. This statue that I'm painting and the surrounding trees with the blue sky and moving clouds behind it, it all seems like there could be some great story behind it. Even while I'm focused on shapes, values and brushwork, part of me is just quietly absorbing the park, the city and my surroundings. You're present in the moment, painting what's in front of you, and sometimes you can capture something that you really like, and also you can get this rare feeling like you're part of the scene, just another passerby, watching the clouds drift in the sky. After finishing the painting, I packed up and kept walking. I wandered across another bridge into a park on the opposite side. There were couples chatting on benches, people feeding birds, photographers capturing the colours of autumn. Every few steps I'd catch something: the curve of a wrought iron balcony, the rhythm of tram wires overhead, the warm tone of old stone buildings catching the late sun. As I crossed the bridge, I paused for a moment. The river below was calm, mirroring the sky, and I could see the spires and rooftops lining the horizon ahead. There's something cinematic about this city. It almost demands to be painted. I kept walking, drawn forward toward the next island, not in a hurry, just letting the atmosphere guide me. As I crossed onto the island, the rhythm of the city fell away. The air was cool, with that unmistakable late autumn sharpness, the kind that carries the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. Leaves clung to the last of their colour, burnt orange and deep rust, rustling like brittle paper overhead. Each step crunched softly underfoot, the gravel path winding past bare-limbed trees and benches half covered in fallen leaves. A gust of wind stirred a small flurry past my boots, and for a moment it felt like the whole park had paused, holding its breath before winter fully arrived. I passed an old fountain, its surface still, catching the fading light like glass. And just beyond, under a canopy of almost empty branches, was a bench. Quiet, still, a perfect place to pause and take it all in. Taking in the pine-scented air and the way the light played off the water, just letting the moment land. I didn't plan to stop for long, but the bench felt like the right place to pause. I wasn't thinking about anything specific, just letting the sounds drift in. Footsteps, distant traffic, the occasional bird. I watched the way the shadows moved under the trees, slow and steady. Like time on its own schedule. It's rare to feel that kind of quiet when you're not at home. And yet somehow it felt like I belonged right there, in that in-between moment, doing nothing at all. Eventually, I made my way to Prague's most famous bridge, Charles Bridge, lined with Baroque statues of saints and protectors. It's the oldest bridge on the Vltava River. And then, just beyond it, I stumbled upon a cathedral so dramatic in its design it looked like a movie set. St. Vitus Cathedral, part of the Prague castle complex, loomed with Gothic intensity. I didn't have time to go inside, but I knew I'd return. The exterior alone was breathtaking, like so much of the city. Prague is filled with that kind of grandeur, old world architecture that feels like it's still very much alive. I then made my way back over Charles Bridge, heading towards the hilltop where Prague Castle sits, towering above the city like a crown. The walk was steep at times, but rewarding at every step. As I climbed higher, The views of Prague gradually opened up before me. A sea of rooftops, bridges, and soft amber light. It felt like walking through a dreamscape painted in ochres, indigos, and pastels. The streets surrounding the castle were just as compelling, cobbled, winding, full of old-world charm. The architecture here had a quiet grandeur, like it had stood through centuries of whispered history and candlelit revolutions. As twilight set in, the city shifted again. I paused to take in the view of the bridges glowing beneath the fading sky, their reflections glittering in the Vltava river. The painter in me was eager to capture it all, but the light was slipping fast, and I didn't have any artificial lighting with me. The nearby street lamps cast a beautiful, dim glow, but not enough to continue painting. Instead, I took mental notes of colour, atmosphere, emotion, and promised myself I'd return to this moment later, with brush in hand. If you're a painter or artist on the path, I've built a quiet corner of the internet for us. Sketchbooks, behind the scenes, weekly sketching hour, and a few things I only share in there. It's free to join, links below if you're curious. I continued exploring the city, eventually visiting one of Prague's lesser-known museums, which had an impressive gallery tucked away inside. I spent hours there sketching marble sculptures, soaking up the silence, the classical forms, the light falling across the surfaces. I took so many reference photos that I actually ran out of phone memory. That's when I knew I'd been fully immersed. The following day, I travelled to Munich to meet an old friend and didn't get a chance to return to my first plein air painting spot, but I'd taken a reference photo, and once back in England, I began the process of finishing the piece in my studio. When I'd originally set up to paint in Prague, I barely had time to block in the composition and add a few brushstrokes before the golden light disappeared. The page was still mostly white, but now back home, I had space and time to push it further. I started working into the river, painting in cool blue and green tones that reflected the fading light I'd seen on location. Even from memory, the surface of the water seemed alive with colour. Glimmers of yellow, violet, turquoise, indigo, all shifting with the movement of the current. I then began to solidify the bridges and surrounding architecture, including the wall on the left that had been catching the last warm bounce of sunlight. That glow stayed in my mind long after leaving. Interestingly, the reference photo I had was taken from a slightly lower level than where I painted, so the composition had to be interpreted and adjusted slightly. But the mood, the structure, the colour relationships, they were all still there to be explored. The painting required patience. I worked with small brushes, turning and tilting them to make fine, angular marks, or gently curved ones around organic shapes. It's a quiet process, rhythmic, almost meditative, but always rewarding. When it came to time to paint the fine details on the nearest bridge, I reached for my rigger brush to get those tight, precise lines. None of my flats were small enough to capture those shadow patterns and structural accents. As with all my plein air work, when travelling at the moment, I use watercolour for colour and white gouache to build opacity and body. This particular white gouache, a large studio tube, was a gift from Clark's Sussex art shop. Shout out to them for their generosity. That tube see me through a fair few paintings already. My main Strada easel was actually in use elsewhere in the studio, I'd been using it to mix colours for a recent large oil painting commission for a lovely client named Tara. Shout out to you too, Tara, if you're watching. So for this Prague painting, I kept things light, just my small watercolour kit, palette and a steady hand. I used a spray bottle to keep the paints active and workable, constantly cleaning my brushes and maintaining clean mixes. This is essential on a small surface like this. From the beginning, I knew this wouldn't be a hyper-detailed piece. It was about capturing the essence, the mood, the reflections, the golden light. I began painting in the spires from the cathedrals and castle elements along the left side of the river. Then I returned to refine the bridge's shadows and the play of water beneath it. When I worked the water again, I layered ultramarine blue, titanium white, touches of magenta, cadmium yellow, yellow ochre and turquoise. These helped capture the varied reflections across the surface, and I began applying thicker impasto strokes to add texture and movement. As the river came to life, I returned to the trees, adding small adjustments to saturation, strokes of detail, tweaks to values. I built up the foreground tree branches using mixes of sap green, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, cadmium yellow light, and titanium white, letting leaves catch just enough light to bring the scene forward. As I sat here, working towards finishing the last few strokes on this river scene, I realised something about painting outdoors, or en plein air, as the French call it. It's not just about accuracy of painting a scene, it's about breathing in the scene, listening to the sound of the water, feeling the air on your skin, and letting those sensations guide your brush. Out there, under shifting clouds and changing light, you don't have the luxury of endless adjustments. You have to work with instinct, commit to marks, and trust that the energy you capture is more important than aiming for any kind of perfection. That's when brushstrokes start to speak, when they become confident, economical, and alive. One thing I've learned is to keep my strokes varied. Long sweeping ones for calm reflections in water, short choppy ones for foliage, a few deliberate sharp edges to pull the eye into a focal point, and I'm always thinking about the rhythm of the painting, how each mark plays against the next. In plein air, speed is your ally, but so is patience. That might sound contradictory, but it's about patience in observation and speed in execution. Spend more time looking than painting. I know this is hard because a lot of the time I look and I just want to immediately dive into painting. But with this practice and discipline, you're going to realize that you move, or when you move, you're moving with a lot more purpose. Prague, with all of its layers of history, almost demands that you observe like that. It's a city where medieval spires rise above cobblestone streets, where Baroque details hide in quiet courtyards. Every corner feels like a painting waiting to happen, but the real magic is in the atmosphere, the faint sense of mystery that's lingered for centuries. I've often wondered if that mystery is why I feel more introspective here and more fascinated with my surroundings. The Vltava River winds through the city like a story in motion, carrying reflections of bridges and towers. At certain points, when I painted it, I thought about how many artists and writers have stood here before me, or at other parts of the river, seeing this same view but through their own eyes, in their own time, painting there on location and writing through incredible inspiration. That's the strange effect of painting. It connects you not only to the present moment, but to a lineage of creators who were also trying to make sense of the world through marks on paper or canvas. If you want to improve as an artist, especially when traveling, my advice is to carry less and look more. Don't overload yourself with every tool and colour you own. Instead, limit your palette where possible and see what magic happens. When you have fewer colours, you start mixing with more intention. You notice subtle temperature shifts and relationships that you might have missed if every hue was pre-mixed in a tube. And speaking of colours, in Prague, the autumn light has this softness to it, almost muted, but with moments of gold when the sun breaks through. You learn to watch for these moments because they can transform a scene in seconds. Suddenly the dome of a church is glowing, or a street is lit like a stage, and you feel that quiet urgency to capture it before it fades. Another tip: never underestimate the power of small sketches. Before I commit to a larger canvas, I'll often do a few quick thumbnail sketches to figure out composition. This is especially helpful in a city like Prague, where there's so much detail that it's easy to get lost in the ornamentation. By sketching small, you force yourself to see big shapes first. The silhouette of a building, pattern of light and shadow, before worrying about the details. And finally, remember that not every painting needs to be a masterpiece. Release the pressure from yourself. You're here to enjoy the moment of traveling, being outdoors, and capturing something that's completely unique to you and your own experience as an artist. Some of these paintings are simply exercises, a way to train your eye and hand. Traveling teaches you that. You learn to value the act of creation itself without attaching too much weight to the outcome. That frees you to experiment, to take risks, and to embrace the imperfections that give your work its personality. But of course, if you're standing there and you have a lot of people watching you, I know how that can influence your ability to be free in the flow state, free moving, and unaffected by trying to impress yourself or impress others. Sometimes you just need to completely immersed in the painting and in the environment and in what you're doing. Stand there, focus, breathe, relax, and just allow the process of painting to take over. That frees you to experiment, to take risks, and to embrace the imperfections that give your work its personality. Whether I'm in a bustling square or sitting quietly by the river, I've realised that painting is my way of truly focusing intently, seeing and listening, being to the world, to my own thoughts, and to something deeper that can't be put into words. So, if you find yourself here one day, maybe with a sketchbook in hand, take a moment to be still. Notice the way the air feels, the colour shifting, the rhythm of footsteps on the cobblestones. Let that guide your marks, and trust that even if the painting doesn't turn out exactly as you envisioned, the experience of making it will leave its mark on you. So I say, go out there, travel as much as you can, wherever you can, and do not hesitate to pull out that sketchbook, those paints, get something down, capture something. You'll feel so good about yourself afterwards. Believe me, it's worth it. Don't second guess yourself. If you have the urge, the inspiration in the moment to do something, instantly decide that you're going to do it. Don't let your mind talk yourself out of doing it for whatever reason. Just act. And you might be pleasantly surprised with what you can come up with. Whereas you might have listened to the voice within that said, for whatever reason, you've got to keep walking, keep moving, probably this, probably that, reasons why you shouldn't do it. Ignore all of those. If you have the ability to stop in your tracks and take action, just do it. Near the end, I painted in a slight perspective reveal of the far side of the nearest bridge, adding stone details, touched up the cathedral spires, and refined the final shadows in the water. When I reached a point where nothing else called for attention, I stopped. I knew it was finished. Both of the paintings featured in this video, the river scene and the statue study, are available to purchase. If you'd like to own one or both, you'll find links to both pieces in the description below.